Hey everyone, Brendan Snyder here. How are you? Thanks so much for joining me and welcome to a special review for the brand new Riley's LA Guns, the Dark Horse album review. Digital release came out on January 22nd of 2024, but this physical copy of it here getting the wider release now, August 16th, 2024, 7 months later. We're going to dive into it here, do a full review, break it all down, and do an unboxing of it. We'll get into it in just a bit, but before we start, if you're new to my channel and you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please do. Also leave a comment, hit like, all those things do help support my channel. I'd greatly appreciate it. And of course, as an added bonus, if you turn on notifications, you'll never miss an episode. You'll stay up to date on really cool things just like this with an album review for the brand new Riley's LA Guns Dark Horse album. All right, so of course, with LA Guns, we are going to have to go back and do some history here. Whether you think you know everything about the band, you probably don't. I've followed them pretty closely, and even sometimes I'm surprised at the stuff that has occurred and gone on with the band. But how do we get from regular LA Guns, original from back in the day, to Riley's LA Guns, and why does it matter? Let's talk about it briefly here. So, band itself originally formed in 1983, which that I didn't realize. So they've been around for 41 years at this point. Pretty crazy thinking about how long that band has actually been around. And, you know, in one incarnation or another, we should be clear about that because there's been so many different versions. I mean, throughout the years, at one point, there were 3 different versions of LA Guns out there touring and recording. So trying to keep all that straight with who's in what lineup and why, all having some form of original members within the group. Now, interestingly, the most consistent member and person who's appeared on more releases than anyone else is actually drummer Stephen Riley, namesake of the group that we're talking about here today. He played in the original classic lineup of the band, recording the classic album Cocked and Loaded from 1989, which featured probably their biggest hit, highest charting certainly, The Ballad of Jane. And, you know, Steve played with both the Phil Lewis-led version of the band and also the Tracy Guns-led version of the band. So he's been in 2 different incarnations that way alone. And of course, when those 2 versions would collide and do their occasional reunions here and there, you know, he was part of those as well. In all, he has played on 14 studio albums from LA Guns, and they got a lot of albums out there. A lot of them are just best ofs and other things too. But I mean, of the albums of material, not best ofs, like new recorded material and stuff like that. Although in here there's a couple covers albums and re-recorded albums, but 14 albums in all. So he's certainly been a part of the LA Guns brand and namesake and all that sort of stuff for a very long time, putting his heart and soul into everything. And someone else who was part of the classic era lineup is Kelly Nichols. And then another member from the Phil Lewis-led version of the band was bassist Scotty Griffin, who recorded the final album, Hollywood Forever, before the 2 versions would split into different factions again. And so initially both used the name LA Guns. We had Phil Lewis, Tracy Guns do their version, and we had Steve Riley doing his version, and they were both out under the name LA Guns. Unfortunately, though, following a lawsuit brought by Tracy Guns, who sued Steve Riley, Riley changed it to Riley's LA Guns. And that's kind of a bummer in my opinion, because each of those guys owned 50% of the band name. They each had half of it because they were the last 2 guys standing at one point. So Riley totally had every right to be out under that name, but just due to lawsuits and costs of everything, he had to back down and chose to go with Riley's LA Guns. So it wasn't a big, long, drawn out battle. And I understand where he's coming with on this. So we end up with Riley's LA Guns. And we got 3 former members of LA Guns in this lineup here. So while the regular version of LA Guns, which has Phil Lewis and Tracy Guns, only 2 guys there, we get 3 over here. Does that make this one more relevant or not? I don't know, but I do want to point that out, that we're not just talking about the drummer off doing his thing. He's got guys in here. So we got, of course, Steve Riley on drums, Kelly Nichols on bass, both those guys coming from the classic lineup of the band. And then we've got Scotty Griffin on guitar now. So he moves from bass onto guitar. And then we have new vocalist, a vocalist that has never sung for LA Guns, because we could have got other guys in there. There was Ralph Sands, there was Paul Black, there was Jizzy Pearl from Love Hate. So all these different guys had come in and sung for LA Guns, but they didn't go that way. They got a different guy, Kurt Froelich, who I think does an amazing job. He has a little bit of that Phil Lewis sound to him, but yet he sounds unique. He doesn't sound like anyone else. And I think that is a good thing to distinguish and keep these two lineups separate. So all in all, cool lineup in my opinion. And that leads us to this version or of the band, O'Reilly's LA Guns, and the album we want to talk about, Dark Horse. So it is the second studio album from this lineup. First one being Renegades, which came out in 2000. And as you can see, it just uses the LA Guns moniker on here. This was put out in 2020 before they had the lawsuit and then changed the name in 2021. So going forward on this 2024 album, that's why we have Riley's LA Guns in there on the title itself. So this album came out digitally on January 22nd of 2024, which was released to celebrate what would have been Steve Riley's birthday, his 67th, or actually 68th, I should say, because he died when he was 67 back in October of 2023. So at this point, almost a year ago, he passed away. And just very unfortunate that that happened. He had a lot of health problems and stuff, as I understand it, towards the end. And unfortunately, that puts the question of the band and whether they're going to continue up in the air. And we don't have information on that as a whole. But at that time, we had the digital copy back in January. So a lot of you have probably devoured this already. And then in April, the record label Golden Robot Records began selling copies from the website, but shipping was $18, and that actually was more than the album itself. And I wasn't willing to spend more on shipping than the album. It put the album price at somewhere over $30 US to ship to me. And I decided to just wait until a domestic release or a wider release came out, which we have finally gotten here. Now, this having just come out on August 16th of 2024. And the reason you're not seeing this review closer to that, because as of the date that this is being filmed on September 13th, this just took that long. So it really took a solid month to get a copy in, because it was back ordered everywhere. Okay, let's move on though. So 10 tracks on the album, clocks in at 46 minutes. Stephen Riley produces this one here. And in my opinion, this is everything that you could want and expect from an LA Guns album. This lineup does it as good as the main band, in my opinion. My complaint with the Phil Lewis, Tracy Guns version of the band and the albums that they have released is that they've all kind of become sounding the same in the last so many releases. I think they have 4 out currently. And in particular, the production on them has been really, really subpar. All 4 of them, in my opinion. And with these 2 records here, the production on these is much, much better. So just in general, I like listening to these way more than I like the Phil Lewis, Tracy Guns version of the band. Not that their albums aren't good. If you can look past that very low subpar production level on it, they're good albums too. But Riley's LA Guns exceeds in a lot of areas. Like I said, the production is far superior. It's better sounding. They're not as muddy. I think that also on both the first release, Renegades, but definitely continued here with the new album, that they take more chances, and the songs that are on here have more variety in them. Like I said, I feel like the Phil Lewis, Tracy Guns version of the band, the stuff is starting to all kind of sound the same to me. I still like Tracy Guns, the way that he writes, the way that he plays, his lead guitar work, but it's all sort of sounding a bit the same, and it's not really standing out to me And so it's almost as though they are trying to write in a particular way, the way they think they need to write. But Riley's LA Guns isn't sticking to that. They're just writing good hard rock guitar music, and yet it still comes off sounding like LA Guns. And that's what I like in particular. So, at least in what I'm attempting to do here, is separate this lineup, this version, this album from the other ones. Why explore this when you have the other? And for me, as I said, production, quality of songs, variety, uniqueness, all those sort of things are what is standing out for this album and certainly the previous album as well. And so I want to make clear here too that I am not in any way knocking the Phil Lewis, Tracy Guns version of the band. I love them just as much. I'm buying those albums too. It's just that there's some differences within this that I think are worth pointing out. And as I mentioned, we got, two classic guys over there, and we've got three guys over here in this. And, in my opinion, I am so glad that we got two versions of the band dropping twice as much music. If you're a fan of the band like I am through the whole era of the band and all the different lineups, then there's just as much to love about these guys continuing on doing it as there is about Phil Lewis and Tracy Guns. And so I'm getting twice as much music from the band LA Guns, just in two formats. That's how I choose to look at it. Let's move into talking about some of the standout songs here. Track number 1, Overdrive, a typical driving hard rock song from the band. It opens the album. It's powerful. It's in your face. I think it makes a great big statement right off the bat, and I love that. Track number 2, Rewind. There's something a little different about this particular song on here. This is one of those unique ones that I'm talking about that's a little different than what you would expect from, say, the regular version of LA Guns or something they would have done in the past. But for whatever reason, it works and it really kicks in, especially during the chorus. So again, it still has a classic LA Guns feel to it. Track number 3, the title track, The Dark Horse. This one here is absolutely killer. So far, it's my favorite song on the album. This one here is a song that made me a fan of both versions of the band, or made me a fan of this version of the band. They had songs like this on the last album, and that's what drew me in and said, I'm okay with two versions of the band, and I'm glad to see they have continued that on in this one here. I'm happy to support both versions of the band. And to me, it's what makes them a legitimate version of the band too, having great songs like this that can stand up against anything in the LA Guns catalog. Track number 8, It's the World, another great rockin' track that's on here. It's got some killer lead right up front in it. And it just makes me wonder why Scotty Griffin was playing bass for the band originally and why he's not out there playing more lead guitar work, because he is a really effective lead guitar player. And, he's very different than Tracy Guns, don't get me wrong, but he rivals him in some of the very interesting, unique way that he plays lead on these tracks, and the stuff that separates these songs from the ones that Tracy does. So I'm loving his guitar playing. I'm hoping this band continues on and does more, whether under a different name or some variation of a name for LA Guns. Track number 9, the last one here to touch on, Down Day Drag. Very interesting track. This one here has a sort of stop-start guitar riff at the beginning before it really kicks in and just has a cool driving force behind the whole song. Killer vocals, killer lead work again from Scotty Griffin on this one. Definitely worth checking out. All right, so let's take a peek at this album. There's our front cover of it. First and foremost, my biggest pet peeve about the Phil Lewis, Tracy Guns version of the band is that they always use this logo. And he used it too on here, and I was a little bummed by that. But of course, it draws in what we would expect. It announces LA Guns because we know that logo. I was so happy to see that they moved away from it on this release here. But of the Phil Lewis, Tracy Guns version of the band, the last 4 albums all have that typical logo on it, just in one way, shape, or form. And it just bothers me. It's like, move beyond that. Have an album cover that says something else. So we are getting that here, albeit the skull is the same skull from inside there, just zoomed in, but there you go. And of course, we get the Riley's LA Guns name much bigger on here, really dominating this thing. And again, I like that because they weren't trying to continue to ride on the laurels of this. They said, we are going to make a name for ourselves. Here it is. This is the backside. We get 4 photos of the guys there with their names running underneath it. Song tracks are down here on this. And so there's that part. There's the spine on it. And when we open this up, this is what we get on the inside. And if I pop out the disc, we do get that classic logo, albeit updated now to say Riley's LA Guns there, as opposed to the way that it was here. They just removed that star and made it smaller and added Riley's in there. So that's what ultimately the logo became. And the album itself dedicated, of course, to Steve Riley there on it. But unfortunately, it is a single piece of paper. A little bit of a bummer there that we don't get a full booklet or anything of that nature. But to be quite honest, I wasn't expecting anything because it was the same thing with this release here. You shell out a lot of money and then you don't get all the band photos, lyrics, fold out booklets, stuff like that. It's been one of my biggest complaints as a physical connoisseur of music when you sort of get cheated on the physical version of this. So that is about the only thing I have to complain about on this release. All right, so bottom line, there's a lot of people that are not going to give this album a chance because it doesn't feature Phil Lewis and Tracy Guns, the more famous guys, but I think they're going to be missing out. If you like LA Guns and you like the sound of them, this has got 3, guys from the band itself in it, continuing on and doing that. If you only like the band from the heyday and you only want to hear Phil Lewis and Tracy Guns, I kind of get that. But this version of the band, definitely worth checking out. They're continuing in the same tradition, and for me at least, that's all that really matters here, that we've got a band that sounds like LA Guns continuing in that tradition. Unfortunately, with the passing of namesake Stephen Riley in October of 2023, it's unclear whether this version of the band plans to continue or not. I've not heard anything. Maybe there's information out there, but nothing, at least formally, has been announced or stated as such. I half expect them to change the name to something else and maybe continue on. I'd love to just see them go with using Kelly Nichols' last name and become Nichols LA Guns. Sounds a little different, but they maybe could perhaps do that. I don't know. Maybe they could go out under the name like Cocked and Loaded, something like that. But all in all, we got 2 fantastic albums from the band. If this is the album they're going out on, I'm really happy and proud to be a fan for this great band. And definitely check it out. So there you go. That is my review for the brand new Riley's LA Guns, the Dark Horse, the full review of that and unboxing, as small as it was, but you got it. Certainly let me know your thoughts on this band. I don't really care whether or not you agree that they went out under the name, but if you want to talk to me about the music, leave it in the comments. All right, everyone, take care, have a good one, and I'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.